Well, hello and welcome to another episode of The Unlicensed Counselor. My name is Steve Moak. I am the Unlicensed Counselor. As always, so grateful to be here on this slightly overcast, dare I say, cool Scottsdale, Arizona day out here. A little brisk. And if you're watching on camera, going with a little flannel motif. I think we might mix it up here. You know, anytime it dips below 70 out here, you can bust out some of the warm stuff. We are not built for cold out here in the desert. But hey, hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving holiday. I know I did. We had family in town. We had kids running around. We went and saw Santa. We went to the zoo. We did all the fun stuff. And I tell you, I was thinking about it too. It's just, a lot of this stuff is like, yeah, okay, it's fun. But when you go with kids now and see the excitement in their eyes, it just kind of sparks something kind of, I don't know if it's in your inner child or what, and it's just so much more fun, especially when you got a bunch of kids running around really going crazy. So I hope yours was as pleasant as mine was, and I hope that you survived all the in-laws and families, maybe stayed out of some political discussions, if that's a hot topic around your Thanksgiving table. But, I know these are interesting times. But, hey, you know what? It's over. Moving on. Now we're going into, honestly, one of my favorite times of the year. It's just that we've got Hanukkah, we've got Christmas, we've got New Year's out here in the desert. We've got golf tournaments. We've got college basketball going. We've got football, Super Bowl. It's just fun. This is a great time of the year just to really enjoy life. And I hope everybody can as you're kind of going through December 1st tomorrow, right? So a couple things on my mind over the course of the last week. And actually, this is a conversation I had with my mother. I'm sure she appreciates me bringing this up on the podcast. But, hey, it's the cost of doing business, right? And it was we were talking about something else entirely. It was just around health-related and different things like that. But the idea of negative self-talk. Right? So the way in which we talk to ourselves, the stories in which we tell ourselves, and how they can start to become a reality, or they can reinforce the way that we think. So I want to dig into kind of what is self-talk, what is negative self-talk, how can it affect your mental health, and maybe some ways to prevent that self-talk, or maybe stop it or curtail it when you kind of start into that. Because look, you're never, I don't think, again, that's why I'm the unlicensed counselor. I don't think you're ever going to stop it, right? But I do find, and I found myself this morning in hot yoga, of course, mind wandering away, starting to drift into things. And I'm just going, why in this peaceful kind of relaxing time am I letting my mind drift into this kind of negative topic, right? But it was so cool because I didn't beat myself up over it. I just kind of let my thoughts wander there, and then just kind of redirected and wandered right back into kind of a focusing on a different thing. And it was really simple, and that's not something that I would have done. In previous life, I would have let kind of those intrusive thoughts or negative self-talk kind of continue to go, and then it really can eat at you. But before I get into the whole kind of pitch and discussion for today, I do want to take a moment and thank some of our sponsors. And look, first and foremost, our sponsor from the beginning, it's ShareTech. ShareTech is the leader in at-home drug and alcohol testing, not only for its accuracy, but for the number of substances it can detect as well. You also get to take this test from the privacy of your own home. It requires no observed collection. So I'm talking eyes on stream, if you know what I mean. Right? And for those of us that have been in the drug and alcohol testing space, we know, you've had to go into the bathroom to ensure that sample was not tampered with, messed with, or substituted with prosthetic devices, which exist out there in the world and do get used, right? So if you go to ShareTech, that's ShareTek, you're going to be able to go to their website and purchase a test. Look, if you need to trust the results, you need to be using the ShareTech test. So a big thank you to ShareTech as we close out really almost a year. I need to check with Robin over here and see when we started this whole commotion. But it's probably coming up here on a year. And a big thanks to ShareTech for continuing to be a sponsor as well too. And actually, the next thing I want to talk about is the Hard Stop, the youth drug abuse prevention campaign that we're doing. We have reached over 600,000 people in the first 6 months of doing this. I'm really excited about the progress that we're making, the following that we're picking up, and obviously the message that we're putting out there. We are not focused on a lot of mental health, behavioral health things. We do one thing, that's youth drug abuse prevention. Go to thestopstartshere.org. Follow us, like us, share our content. It's edgy. We only focus on social media. We just believe that if we can have 10 to 30 seconds of your child's attention every couple days or weeks, that reinforcement of the drug abuse prevention messaging is really what's going to be the difference maker, not an assembly that you sit in one time a year for an hour. So again, go to thestopstartshere.org and follow us over there for more info on what we're doing. And I appreciate the follows, not only on the Unlicensed Counselor, but also on the Hard Stop stuff as well too. So thanks to everybody in this journey. Really, it's been a fun year in doing this. So back to the topic at hand. What was that? 9 months, Robin's saying. 9 months. Okay. A little ahead of the game, but that's pretty good. 9 months. And you've been sitting over there so quietly the whole time. I'm surprised I haven't gotten more guff from you. For those of you who are out there, we've got Robin in studio. She produces the show, and it's just been awesome to as a brand new podcaster on this as well too. So it's been funny. Howard Stern has his Robin, and I've got mine as well too. So thank you, and I appreciate that. Back to the topic at hand. So, again, self-talk. So this whole thing came about, my mom was having, had to have, a surgery, and there's no such thing as minor surgery, right? And, we got to talking afterwards, and, the conversation was just around, they're not even 70 years old yet. So let's frame this for what it is. So, obviously people are getting older. We all do. That's how this whole deal works, right? But it was just some of the comments that were being made for people who are healthy. And this wasn't like removing cancer or anything like that. I'm not going into the whole thing. But this was just something that needed to be done to improve overall health and well-being, right? As many people do, young and old, right? But the thing that popped into my mind, and I brought this up in the midst of our discussion as well too, is like, look, the things that we start to tell ourselves, whether it's old or I'm slowing down or I can't do this anymore, or I don't feel great, or whatever that is, when we say that enough, I think not only our mind starts to believe it, but I feel like our body starts to believe that as well too. You can go off on the mind-body connection. You believe it, you don't believe it. I tend to find that there is a lot of truth in that. Call it the yogi stuff or the influence in my life, but I just do. So I think it's really important to kind of be aware or be more conscious of the things that we say and the role in which our brain and our mind and that self-talk impacts our life. Really, so the way that we talk to ourselves, that inner voice, right, it combines kind of our conscious thoughts with our beliefs and biases, and we just kind of have that inner monologue that's going on all day long. And self-talk is a big, important part of how you feel and what you do. It can be supportive and beneficial and motivating, or it can be negative, undermining, and can really impact your confidence all around. So, making sure that we're kind of monitoring, it's kind of weird of like looking at our brain and thoughts almost from the outside, if that's possible. So kind of shifting your perspective to kind of be able to monitor how you're thinking is a really tough and maybe unique concept. But the negative self-talk, so what is negative self-talk, right? I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's when that inner voice, right, that monologue that's going all day long is excessively negative. It sounds more like an inner critic. It's pessimistic. It focuses on the bad. It takes away from your confidence, and it stops you from reaching your full potential. It really kind of can stop you before you even get going. I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm not good at this. I've tried that. It's not working. It's just those things that can be repetitive and may or may not really reflect reality. And it's just that rumination of those negative thoughts and how they kind of roll through our head, right? So that is an important part of how that's going to obviously affect our mental health as well, too. So today I wanted to kind of dig into just some tips to stop the negative talk, right? How do we kind of stop that? Because I don't think that we're going to entirely stop it, but it's like when we start to wonder, like I was saying earlier, when we dip into kind of how that negative thing starts to pop up and ruminate, How can we bring it back? So the first thing I had on my list of just be aware of what you're saying to yourself, right? Just the act of stopping and recognizing negative thoughts for what they are, that's the first step in working through the problem, right? Ask yourself, would you like to talk to someone else like this? There was an article that I was pulling up as I was kind of doing show prep and research that kind of reinforced a lot of these same things that I'd written down in my notes. And it's just like, be more aware of what you're saying to yourself, positive and negative, right? But I really want to focus on those negative things and those beliefs that we keep telling ourselves, right? And I want you to be able to challenge those things. First off, is it even true, right? Is it true or is it not true? Is there another way that you could be looking at this situation? Is there another possible explanation for this? I feel like it's sometimes when people go to the grocery store and it's like I always get into the longest line, right? Or every time I'm in the checkout line, something goes wrong or the person in front of me has an issue or, maybe it's driving or whatever it is. And I actually remember having a conversation with a girlfriend around this. And I was like, I have a hard time believing that every single time you're in line at the grocery store that, something's happening with the person in the cashier in front of them. So maybe it's your belief system or the way that which you're viewing it or trying to find something to kind of then support your beliefs that leads you to feel as if this is happening every single time. So, again, looking for another explanation of how this could have happened or why this situation is happening. But then it's also like, are you playing a little bit of the victim here in this thing, or are you just viewing these situations through a lens that always kind of sees the same thing or wants to see the same thing over and over again? So I think that really kind of makes me think about putting your thoughts into perspective, right? So try and look at things from a different perspective, a new lens, right? What would the person looking at this situation back, what would they be thinking, right? Maybe you can write down some of these things. Will this matter in 5 minutes, a day, a week, a year? Certainly probably not in 5 years. So if you're able to kind of within those times, those thoughts coming up and they're frustrating you or they're kind of beating you over the head and just repeating and repeating, let's maybe challenge those thoughts or let's try and shift the perspective on exactly why we're having those thoughts and maybe how we could view them a little bit differently. Now there are some techniques that are around how you can actually stop the thought, right? And I encourage you to kind of Google those by imagining, you can go out and Google a bunch of different ways to be able to do that. But the one that I've kind of found when I was doing research on this topic was literally having that thought come up in your head and you almost like squash it, right? So it's a thought that comes into your head. It's running through your head. And again, I had a lot of these, especially when I was early on in my divorce. It's just like those thoughts they just won't stop, right? And it eats at you, it wears on you, it borderline makes you depressed. I think it does make a lot of people depressed. I combated that through exercise and friends and being active and not being alone and all that type of stuff. But I think the actual thought, exercise of squashing that thought, visually having it almost like some type of ritual in your brain that's like comes up, squashed it, comes up, squashed it, move it off to the side, swipe it off like you're swiping on Tinder or something like that, right? And then what you can do as you start to make these and practice these exercises is let's replace that thought with maybe a more positive thought. So what is a more helpful thought than just this negative thing that keeps jumping into my brain? Let's replace that with some type of positive thought that can hopefully get us shifted and moving our brain into a different direction, right? So, there's a lot of different ways to prevent the negative self-talk, but the list that I put together, let me just blow through some examples. First off, it's just, paying attention. It's cultivating awareness is really what it is. Pay attention to those thoughts and recognize when you get into those patterns. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be able to identify a trigger that leads to that negative self-talk as well, too. Maybe you're listening. I have a fraternity brother from college, right? His name's Marty. Good dude. Hope you're listening, Marty. Been a buddy of mine for 20 plus years, right? And he always listens to that kind of music it's a little down, a little sad, it's like something you put on after a hard breakup, and you kind of get we called it Marty music, right? It was just Marty music. So let's just say that you had Marty music playing the entire time, and those would trigger those feelings of sadness because you just lost your job, broke up with a girlfriend. Now that music is playing, and so maybe that's a trigger that sets you off on some of these patterns. So, not to pick on Marty, but find out what those things are. Maybe it's the way that you drive to work and you're like, oh, that was our favorite pizza place and we used to go to then take a left where you used to take a right. Like, do what you have to do to break those patterns that kind of lead to those triggers or in those challenging thoughts as well too. And again, let's be sure that we're challenging those negative thoughts. Is it even a valid thought? Or is it based on a lack of facts or an assumption or any evidence maybe that could contradict these negative beliefs as well too? Maybe you're not as bad at this thing that you think that you are and maybe you have examples where you can point to that you've been successful when you've tried new things or made new friends when you switched to a job or whatever it is, right? And this is, next up on my list, this is one that I've actually been working on as it pertains to negative self-talk is, let's go easy on ourselves. So practice a little self-compassion as you're going through this negative self-talk. Again, I don't believe that you're going to be able to just entirely stop it. My opinion, take it for what it's worth. But I go easier on myself instead of being like, God, why do I keep having this stupid thought? I can't get it out of my mind. It's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I have that thought. Yeah, not great. I don't even really know why it keeps popping itself up, but let's be a little kinder to yourself. Maybe like you would be kind to your friend. Why would we be nicer to other people than to ourselves, right? So understand that, maybe some mistakes were made. Your brain isn't perfect, and you can kind of let some of this stuff go. So you're practicing a little compassion as you're kind of working your way and practicing, because I do think kind of combating or preventing some of this negative self-talk takes repetition. It's like an exercise, right? You just got to keep practicing it. You're not just going to start it tomorrow and be like, I got it. Never going to do self-talk again. I just don't believe that's really going to happen. Going back to kind of a point I mentioned earlier is just using those positive affirmations. So let's start to replace, or maybe you say something negative, but let's see if we can then dovetail it into something positive here, right? Or maybe find some way to do daily positive affirmations. Start to focus on your strengths, maybe things that you have accomplished, instead of beating yourself up over the things that you haven't. And again, this is where I also think, a little less time on the social media front could be important as well too, and less focus on what others have and what you don't have, and more focus on what you have done and the good person that you are, the reputation that you've built, and how you treat other people and how you're responsible and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I think another thing in general is making sure that you surround yourself with some positivity as well too. And I've said this in a lot of different aspects on this podcast as well too. But the people you spend time around are how they are, how their demeanor is, their work ethic, their positivity or negativity will ultimately kind of dictate how you become many times, right? So if you're around a bunch of negative, pessimistic people who see the bad in everything, I'm going to keep my political comments to myself that are running through my head right now, but you're going to be around who you are, who you kind of associate with, right? So consume positive and inspirational content and not maybe some of the negative shows or musics or whatever it is that kind of brings you down, right? Now, as you're kind of working on this kind of exercise of, better self-talk or preventing negative self-talk, let's make sure that you're not setting yourself up to negatively talk about yourself by having unrealistic goals. So maybe you want to do something, right? We got New Year's coming up. We're going to have a lot of goal setters out there. We're going to have a lot of people at the gym. We're going to have a lot of stuff going on. Let's make sure that you're not setting yourself up for failure by thinking you got a little too grandiose with some of your goals. Let's make them a little more manageable. Let's celebrate kind of small successes, no matter how small they are, and let's break things down into kind of achievable tasks. So again, you're not just like, oh, I didn't go out and run a marathon. Well, you weren't running at all. So maybe we should have shot for that 3-mile, 5K first instead of that, right? So you're not beating yourself up because you set yourself up better for success, right? this one always makes it into an episode of The Unlicensed Counselor. Practice mindfulness and meditation, right? I've been trying to work on meditation myself as well, too. You can go through the mindfulness stuff all you want in Google, use the Headspace, use the different apps and things like that. But I really have found that the meditation can help create that sense of calm and that detachment. And again, I'll just say it again, meditation, yes, it could be in a room with, some music and your eyes closed, or it could be gardening where you're just focused on one thing, or out in the yard kind of pulling weeds, or a walk in nature. Like, think about meditation in different ways, because maybe not everybody's just going to sit down and have the peace fingers and be able to kind of check out for 5 minutes. But if you can go for a walk out in the desert, or the sunset, or the sunrise, or take your dog, find somewhere where you just get alone with your thoughts so you can find that calm and detach a little bit, and leave the damn phone when you're trying to do this as well too, if you can, please, right? Next up, let's just try and focus on solutions to problems. I'm a big solution-focused guy. I know there's some gender differences, and guys a lot of times want to come in and try and fix problems and things like that. I think that's a good trait. I think you also got to know when to sporadically use that within relationships and things like that. Sometimes folks just want to be heard and not necessarily fixed all at one time. So keep that in mind as you're going through kind of focusing on solutions. But I do think taking steps proactively to address challenges rather than succumbing to kind of that self-criticism, like I told myself I couldn't do it. You know what? I've done this a million times. I suck at it. I'm never going to be able to do X, Y, or Z, fill in the blank. So, shifting the focus to finding solutions is a way to kind of help prevent the negative self-talk that can churn up, and it can turn up really quickly, right? We've talked about gratitude, I think, almost ad nauseum on this podcast. And actually, over the last week, I think we've probably talked about it a little bit more, just because, not just we, just in general as society, because we've been through Thanksgiving and kind of gratitude and what that all comes with. But really, the last thing on my list that I had for, preventing the self-talk was just celebrate some of the achievements. Acknowledge some of the successes that you've had in your life. And again, no matter how small, I think a little positive reinforcement and a little positive self-talk is going to help keep us going in that right direction and keep those negative things, off to the side. But I really think this boils down to, who we spend time with, right? Actively practicing when we have these negative thoughts come up, how we address them. Can you quash those thoughts? Can you redirect those thoughts? Can you challenge those thoughts? And just stop telling yourself the same things and throwing that little pity party that goes on in your mind when it's so easy to do, especially when things get hard, right? When it's easy and life is good and you're healthy and you're doing all the things that you want to be doing, yeah, it's a little bit easier. But when you have a surgery, when you do get sick, or you lose a loved one, or whatever it is, allow yourself a little grace to have some negative thoughts and those negative self-talk kind of come in. But be prepared to be able to challenge those things so that you can pull yourself out. Because really, negative self-talk, if left untreated, just will continue to go. And I mean, go to where it's dragging you down. Now you've got your drinking to kind of quash those thoughts a little bit more. You've stopped going to the gym. Maybe you're starting to isolate from your friends more. Maybe you stop going to see your therapist. Maybe you're not returning the phone calls of the friend because you're just kind of going down. And now you're starting to spiral, right? Now you're just kind of getting lower and lower in that world. And that probably started with just a little bit of self-talk that, left untreated, has now gotten you into kind of a darker place and potentially depression or worse. So I think it's something that needs to be discussed a little bit more. I mean, nobody talks to you as much as we talk to ourselves, right? That little voice that's going on in our head all day long. We need to be able to really exercise that muscle like we would exercise anything else. And if you're constantly beating yourself up, it's going to lead you into some unhappier places. So I hope that you take a few minutes out of your day. Obviously, listen to this podcast. Maybe share it with a friend who maybe you think is a little more negative than maybe they should be or need to be, and challenge them to listen to this and maybe have a discussion around, maybe ways you could even help hold each other accountable for negative self-talk, or when it comes up, or how these things can be kind of, treated. So I hope this provided a little bit of value. It's something I had on my mind. I just think it's really interesting. Share it with a friend. This is a great time of year to start thinking about these things, because we're going to set into 2024. You can kind of have a new path, a new mentality, and really hopefully achieve some greater results just in kind of overall positive mental health and positive self-talk as well too. So good stuff. I love that. I was looking forward to this episode. So again, my name is Steve Moak. I am the Unlicensed Counselor. Until next time, thank you very much.